Beast attacked, human boy held his ground, and the alien clan took note. Elias was never meant to be a warrior. In the quiet human settlement on the outskirts of the alien colonies, he had always been a quiet boy. People in his community were used to the towering alien warriors, their sharp features and frightening armor. They were strong, imposing, and they had little time for the fragile humans who had been brought to this planet years ago. His family, like many others, lived in the shadow of the alien empire. They were under constant watch, never truly free. The larger clans of aliens ruled everything, deciding who could farm, who could trade, and who could speak. Humans had no power here, no rights. And as for Elias, he was just another boy in a world where survival was enough to get by. He had never thought much beyond his small world, until today. It was a day like any other. The sky was heavy with the looming threat of a storm, the air thick with moisture. Elias had wandered off the beaten path, something he often did to escape the pressure of the settlement. He had grown tired of the constant murmurs and judgment of the alien overseers. There, on the edge of the settlement, Elias found solace in the wilderness that surrounded his people. But today, the forest was different. A low, almost imperceptible rumble reached his ears, vibrating through the ground. Elias froze, his heart beating louder than the earth itself. In front of him, through the heavy brush, something moved. It was large, too large to be any animal he had ever seen, and it moved with a predator's grace. The shadows cast by the towering trees seemed to stretch unnaturally as the creature emerged. It was the Vorak. The beast was a terrifying sight, massive and covered in jagged scales that gleamed like dark steel in the faint light. Its eyes burned with a primal rage, and its maw was full of sharp, glinting teeth that could tear through metal with ease. The Vorak was known across the planet, a creature feared by even the most skilled alien warriors. Its presence was enough to send entire villages running for cover. Elias' body trembled. He had heard the stories, the warnings, but no one ever truly believed the Vorak was real. It was always a myth, something to frighten children. Yet here it was, standing before him, its massive form towering over him. It growled, a deep, rumbling sound that seemed to shake the very air around him. Panic clawed at Elias' chest. His instincts screamed for him to run, to hide, to find safety in the depths of the settlement. But he couldn't. His legs refused to move. He was frozen in place, staring up at the beast that had made itself known as a destroyer of worlds. The Vorak snorted, its hot breath brushing across Elias' face, and for a moment all he could do was close his eyes and brace for impact. But then something strange happened. A voice, small and quiet, whispered in his mind. It was his mother's voice, faint but clear, telling him to be brave, to stand tall. Elias didn't know where the courage came from, but something in him shifted. Maybe it was the thought of his family back at the settlement, their faces full of worry. Maybe it was the knowledge that if he ran now, they would always see him as weak, as the boy who couldn't protect them. Or maybe it was just the simple desire to survive. Whatever it was, Elias gripped the broken branch in his hand, his only weapon, and held it out, trying to steady his shaking hands. The Vorak snarled, its eyes locking onto Elias', and for a moment the world felt still. There was no sound, no movement, just him and the beast, each measuring the other. The Vorak lunged. It was fast, faster than anything Elias had ever seen, and before he knew it, the beast was upon him, its claws swiping through the air. Elias barely managed to duck, the sharp talons grazing the side of his face, leaving deep cuts that stung. His body hit the ground hard, the wind knocked out of him. He gasped for air, scrambling backward, his hands slipping on the wet earth. The Vorak roared in frustration, its tail lashing violently. Elias' heart raced and his mind struggled to focus. Every part of him screamed to run, to escape. But he couldn't. There was no way out. The Vorak was faster, stronger, and he was just a boy. He didn't have the strength or the skill to face such a beast. Yet, somewhere deep within him, Elias found the will to keep moving. His hand gripped the broken branch tighter, and with a newfound resolve, he pushed himself to his feet. The Vorak turned to face him again, its massive body blocking out the sky. Elias could hear his heart pounding in his ears, but he didn't hesitate. He ran at the beast, swinging the branch with everything he had. It didn't do much. The beast hardly noticed the strike, its tough hide shrugging off the attack like it was nothing. Elias stumbled forward, almost losing his footing, but he refused to back down. He dodged another swipe of the Vorak's claws, the air cutting around him like a knife. He had no plan, no idea what to do, but something inside him refused to give up. As the Vorak lunged again, Elias rolled to the side, narrowly avoiding the creature's powerful jaws. He scrambled to his feet, breathless, his mind racing. He needed to outsmart the beast. He needed to do something the Vorak wouldn't expect. It came to him in a flash: use the environment. The forest around him was thick with dense underbrush and twisted vines. If he could get the creature tangled in the roots, it might slow it down long enough for him to make his move. The Vorak was a brute force, but it wasn't agile in the way he needed it to be. Elias darted to his right, luring the creature toward a patch of thick vines. The Vorak growled, its eyes narrowing as it chased him, but Elias was faster on his feet. He dove through the vines, sliding under the tangled mass of plants. The Vorak followed, but it wasn't quick enough. Its massive body got caught in the vines, its claws scraping against the earth as it struggled to free itself. Elias took the opportunity, running back toward the beast, his breath ragged but his eyes locked on the prize. He reached down and grabbed a jagged stone, holding it tightly in his hand. With a roar, the Vorak freed itself from the vines and turned to face him once more, but it was too late. Elias, now filled with adrenaline and a new sense of determination, charged at the beast once more. He swung the stone with all his might, aiming for the soft spot between its eyes. The beast let out a final, shrill cry as Elias' makeshift weapon struck true. The Vorak staggered, its body collapsing to the ground with a mighty crash. Elias stood there, chest heaving, as he watched the creature's massive form fall lifeless to the earth. His body was covered in blood and dirt, his muscles aching, but he was alive. He had done it. He had faced the impossible and survived. For the first time in his life, Elias felt something he had never known before: respect, for himself, for his ability to survive, and for the strength that had always been hidden deep inside him. And as he stood there, looking down at the creature that had terrorized the land for so long, he realized that today had changed everything. The alien clans wouldn't look at him the same way anymore. He wasn't just a boy anymore. He had proven he could stand his ground. And that, for Elias, was the beginning of something much larger than himself. The forest was silent now. Elias stood in the shadow of the fallen Vorak, his chest rising and falling with each heavy breath. The air smelled of earth and blood, a strange mixture that sent a chill through him. His hands were covered in the creature's dark, sticky blood, and his body trembled from exhaustion. He had never fought anything before, let alone a beast like the Vorak. Yet here he was, alive and standing over the monster that had terrified his people for as long as anyone could remember. But Elias didn't feel like a hero. He didn't feel like a warrior. He only felt the weight of what he had just done, the strain of the battle still weighing heavily on his body. The Vorak's body was massive, its limbs twisted in unnatural positions as it lay defeated on the ground. Elias wiped the sweat from his brow, trying to clear his mind. His heart was still pounding, but a part of him knew this wasn't the end. The sound of footsteps broke the silence. Elias' eyes shot to the edge of the clearing. A group of figures emerged from the trees, moving quickly but cautiously. Their movements were fluid, practiced, and their faces were covered by helmets. Elias froze, his body tensing. His first instinct was to run, but where would he go? There was no safe place to hide now, not after what he had done. The figures stopped just at the edge of the clearing, their eyes trained on him. For a moment they didn't speak. The wind picked up, rustling the leaves around them. Then one of them stepped forward. It was a woman, tall and built like a warrior, her armor a mixture of dark metal and leather. She removed her helmet, revealing sharp, angular features and piercing green eyes. Elias had seen her before, Zara, the leader of the alien clan that controlled this region. Her reputation was one of strength and fear. She was known to be ruthless in battle, and no one had ever defeated one of her warriors. Yet here she was, standing before Elias, her eyes narrowed as she studied him. "You're human," Zara said, her voice low and steady. "I've never seen a human fight like that before." Elias didn't know how to respond. His throat was dry and his tongue felt heavy in his mouth. His mind raced, trying to figure out why they were here. Were they going to kill him for what he had done? Would they punish him for killing their beast, a creature that was feared by all of them? Zara seemed to read his thoughts. She looked down at the Vorak, her eyes lingering on the beast's lifeless form before returning to Elias. "I'm not here to punish you," she said. "I'm here because what you did was impressive." Elias blinked, confused. What do you mean, I just survived? Zara nodded slowly. That's the point, human. You didn't just survive, you fought. You fought something no one else would dare face. You showed courage. Something I thought was rare among your kind. Her words didn't make sense to Elias. Humans were weak as far as the aliens were concerned. They were subjugated, always under the watch of the alien clans, never able to stand up for themselves. But here she was, telling him that he had done something remarkable. The idea seemed impossible to grasp. Elias' legs felt weak as the reality of what he had done began to settle in. He had fought and killed the Vorak, something that no one in his village had ever thought possible. The beast that had terrorized their homes for years, he had taken it down. But instead of fear, all he felt now was exhaustion. The other members of the clan remained silent, watching Elias closely. They were waiting for something, though he wasn't sure what. Zara didn't speak again right away. She just stared at him, as though evaluating him in some way that made Elias uncomfortable. Finally, she stepped closer. "You're different," she said softly. "You've shown something no one expected from a human. Most would have run at the sight of the Vorak, but you stayed, you fought." Elias swallowed hard. "I didn't know what else to do. I couldn't run." "Not anymore, not after. Everything." Zara's expression softened just for a moment. "Perhaps that is the real strength, the ability to stand your ground even when you're afraid." She turned and motioned for the others to step forward. "I want to make an offer to you, Elias." Elias took a step back, unsure of what she meant. He was just a boy, a human boy out here in the wilderness, alone. What could someone like her want with him? Zara seemed to sense his hesitation. "I'm offering you the chance to join our clan, to become a warrior under my command." The words took a moment to register. Elias felt his breath catch in his throat. This had to be some sort of trick. Why would the aliens want him? He was just a human. He wasn't even a skilled fighter. He had only survived the Vorak because of luck, not skill, and even now his body was bruised and broken. He wasn't ready to be anything other than a boy running from danger. "Why me?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'm not a warrior, I'm just a boy." Zara studied him carefully before answering. "You may not be a warrior now, but you have potential. You've shown me that, and in our clan, potential means everything." She gestured to the others. "These are my top warriors. They were once like you. They had nothing. They were outcasts, but they chose to stay, to fight, to prove themselves." The idea of joining them felt foreign to Elias. He had spent his life avoiding the alien warriors. They were monsters in their own way, ruling over his people with fear and control. To join them, to fight beside them, it seemed impossible. Yet something inside him stirred. The thought of standing alongside these warriors, of proving that he belonged, was an odd feeling. Could he really do it? "What would I have to do?" Elias asked cautiously. Zara smiled slightly. "You would train, you would fight. You would learn what it means to be strong, to be respected. You would learn to stand your ground just as you did today." Elias hesitated, the weight of the decision heavy on his shoulders. This was the moment that would change everything. He could stay here, in the quiet of the human settlement, always fearing the aliens and what they might do. Or he could accept Zara's offer and step into a world of strength and power, where he would be able to take control of his own fate. Finally, after a long pause, Elias nodded. "I'll do it. I'll join your clan." Zara's eyes flickered with something like approval, and she turned to her warriors. "Prepare him for the trials. It's time he learns what it truly means to fight." As they moved to begin his training, Elias felt a mix of fear and excitement. He didn't know what the future held for him, but he knew one thing. His life would never be the same again. The boy who had once been afraid of the world was now standing in the midst of it, ready to carve his own path. Elias woke early the next morning, the cool air of the alien world biting at his skin. The sky above was a strange shade of purple, the clouds swirling in patterns he couldn't understand. The settlement was still quiet, as the sun hadn't yet risen. For a moment he almost wished he was back in his small home, nestled in the human village where things were predictable even if they were difficult. But then he remembered the night before. The Vorak, the battle, the offer from Zara. His heart pounded in his chest as he stood up from his makeshift bed. It was still hard to believe it all, especially the part where he had agreed to join Zara and her warriors. He wasn't sure what he had been thinking, but something in him had shifted. The fight against the beast had awakened something deep inside him, a desire to prove that he was more than just a boy. He wanted to be strong, to be someone who stood tall, no matter what the world threw at him. He got dressed quickly, putting on the simple armor Zara had given him the day before. It was nothing like the heavy, intimidating armor the alien warriors wore, but it was a start. It felt strange against his skin, stiff and uncomfortable, but it also felt like a symbol of the change he had decided to embrace. He was no longer just a human in hiding. He was going to become something more. As he walked out of the small hut he had been given, he found Zara waiting for him. She was standing by a fire, her dark armor gleaming in the early light. Her eyes were sharp like a predator watching its prey, but there was something else in her gaze, curiosity, maybe even respect. "Are you ready?" she asked, her voice calm but carrying a weight that made Ilias feel like he had no choice but to say yes. He nodded, trying to hide the nervousness in his chest. "Yes, I'm ready." Zara motioned for him to follow, and they walked toward the training grounds. It wasn't far from where the rest of the warriors had gathered, their faces hard and focused. They were practicing combat drills, moving in perfect synchronization as they demonstrated their skill. Ilias could see the way they moved, each warrior fluid and precise, like machines designed for battle. He felt small and unskilled in comparison, but he pushed the feeling away. Today was about learning, and he had to start somewhere. As they reached the training area, Zara turned to him. "You will train with the others. They will show you the basics, the first step toward becoming one of us." Ilias glanced around at the alien warriors, all of them towering over him, their eyes filled with silent judgment. He had no weapons, no training, and no idea what to do next. But he wasn't going to back down now. He had already made his choice. Zara raised a hand, and one of the warriors, a tall alien with dark purple skin, stepped forward. His name was Zor, and he was one of Zara's most trusted soldiers. His gaze was piercing as he looked down at Ilias, sizing him up. "You're human," Zor said, his voice thick with disdain. "This will be a waste of time." But Zara's voice cut through the air, commanding and firm. "You will train him, Zor, the same way you train all the others. No exceptions." Zor hesitated for a moment, but then he nodded, clearly displeased. "Fine, follow me, human, let's see what you're made of." Zor led Ilias to a sparring area where two warriors were practicing hand-to-hand combat. The warriors moved quickly, their bodies twisting and turning in fluid motions that seemed impossible. They fought without hesitation, each move designed to disable or kill. Ilias felt a knot in his stomach as he watched them. There was no way he could do this. He didn't have the strength or the experience. Zor turned to him. "You'll start with something simple, show me what you've got." Ilias hesitated. He wasn't sure what to do, but then he remembered the fight against the Vorak. He had used his surroundings, his wits, to survive. Maybe he could do the same here. Maybe strength wasn't all that mattered. "All right," Ilias said, his voice steadier than he felt. Zor seemed almost disappointed by Ilias' words, but he didn't comment. He simply moved into a stance, ready for the training to begin. Ilias mimicked him as best as he could, trying to remember the posture of the warriors he had seen. Zor attacked first, moving with incredible speed. He threw a punch at Ilias' chest, but Ilias managed to sidestep just in time. His heart raced as he realized he had avoided the blow. He wasn't entirely useless. Zor didn't stop, though. He attacked again, this time with a series of fast strikes aimed at Ilias' head. Ilias barely managed to block the first one, but the second punch hit him hard, knocking him back. He stumbled, almost falling, but he caught himself. His body hurt and his mind raced, but he knew he couldn't give up. Zor stepped back, watching Ilias carefully. "Not bad for a human," he said, his voice neutral. "But you need to do more than just dodge, you need to fight back." Ilias nodded, swallowing hard. He wasn't sure how to fight back, but he had to try. He took a deep breath, focusing on Zor's movements. He had to be quicker, smarter. He couldn't outmatch the alien warriors in strength, but he could outthink them. Zor attacked again, this time with a low kick aimed at Ilias' legs. Ilias jumped back, narrowly avoiding the blow. He used the momentum of the jump to launch himself forward, throwing a punch at Zor's side. It wasn't much, but it landed. Zor didn't seem surprised, but there was something in his eyes, an acknowledgement of Ilias' effort. Zara, who had been watching from the sidelines, stepped forward. "You see, Zor, he can learn. He's not just some weak human, he's strong in his own way." Zor didn't reply immediately. He simply nodded, though his expression was hard to read. "We'll see if he can keep up." The rest of the training continued like that, with Ilias learning the basics of combat from the alien warriors. He wasn't fast or strong, but he was persistent. Every time he was knocked down, he got back up. Every time he was hit, he learned something new. His body ached, but his determination grew stronger with each passing minute. As the day wore on, Elias' movements became more fluid. He didn't have the skill of the others, but he had something else, a drive to prove himself, to show that he could belong in this world. He had fought the Vorak, and now he was fighting to become something more than the boy he had been before. By the time the sun began to set, Elias was exhausted, but he was also proud. He wasn't ready to face the alien warriors head-on, but he was getting there. The lessons were hard, the pain was constant, but for the first time in his life, Elias felt like he was on the path to something greater. As he sat down to rest, Zara walked over to him. "You did well today," she said, her tone softening just a little. "You're learning." Elias smiled, though it was small. "I'm not there yet, but I'll get there." Zara looked at him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. "You've got the spirit, Elias, that's more than most." The words meant more to Elias than he could say. He wasn't just a boy anymore. He was becoming something more, and for the first time he felt like he was exactly where he was meant to be. Days passed, and Elias found himself spending more and more time in the training grounds. Each day brought new lessons, new challenges, and new realizations about what it meant to be part of the alien clan. He wasn't the fastest, the strongest, or the most skilled, but he was learning. Every bruise, every drop of sweat brought him closer to something he couldn't fully understand yet, something larger than just survival. Zor continued to push him. Every time Elias thought he couldn't go on, Zor would push harder. Every time Elias thought he had learned enough, Zor would show him just how much he still had to learn. The alien warrior was tough, unyielding, and relentless, but Elias didn't give up. There were days when his muscles burned with exhaustion, when he could barely lift his arms, but he kept going. Every time Zor knocked him down, Elias got back up, determined not to be beaten. Zara observed from a distance, occasionally stepping in to offer guidance or critique. Her eyes never left him, always watching, always calculating. There were times when Elias caught a glimpse of something other than the cold, calculating warrior in her gaze, something like approval or perhaps respect. But it was fleeting, gone as quickly as it appeared. Elias was beginning to understand the true nature of the clan. The alien warriors weren't just strong because of their training or their weapons. They were strong because of their belief in themselves, their ability to push through pain and doubt, and their willingness to fight for what they believed in. It wasn't just about being physically strong. It was about mental strength, the ability to hold your ground no matter the odds. He had seen it in Zor, in Zara, and in every warrior he trained with. They didn't just fight with their bodies, they fought with their minds, their will to win, to survive, to be the best. And as Elias continued to train, he realized something. He had that same will inside him. It had been there all along, buried beneath the fear and doubt. It had taken a fight with the Vorak to bring it to the surface, but now that it was there, Elias wasn't sure he could ever go back to being the person he was before. One evening, after a particularly grueling training session, Zara approached him. He had collapsed on the ground, his breath ragged, sweat dripping down his face. He had given everything he had that day, and it still didn't feel like it was enough. "You've come a long way," Zara said, her voice cool and calm as always. She stood above him, looking down with the same calculating expression. "But you still have far to go." Elias nodded, not surprised by her words. He knew he wasn't there yet, he wasn't even close. "I'll get there," he said, though his voice was tired. "I'll keep trying." Zara regarded him for a moment before speaking again. "I believe you will, but there's more to being a warrior than simply learning to fight." Elias looked up at her, confused. "What do you mean?" "There is always something to fight for," she explained, her eyes narrowing. "You have to find your purpose. You can't just fight for the sake of fighting. There must be a reason to keep going when it gets hard, when you feel like you can't take another step. Without that, you will break." Elias thought about her words for a moment. He hadn't really thought about it that way. He had just been focused on learning, on surviving. But now that Zara had said it, it made sense. He needed something more than just the will to survive. He needed a reason to fight, a reason to keep pushing forward. The next few days were harder than ever. Zor pushed him past his limits, testing him in ways that left him sore and exhausted. But Elias kept his focus. He kept his mind on the future, on what he was fighting for. Every time he was knocked down, he reminded himself that he wasn't just fighting for himself. He was fighting for something bigger than that, something that he hadn't fully realized until now. One day, Zara called him over after training. The other warriors were resting, but Elias still felt like he had more to prove. "Come here, Elias," Zara said, her voice firm but not unkind. Elias approached her, wiping the sweat from his brow. "Yes, you've shown that you have the will to learn. You've shown that you can endure pain, that you can survive, but there's one thing you haven't learned yet." Elias looked at her, waiting for her to continue. "You haven't learned what it means to lead," she said, her gaze piercing. "And that is the true test of a warrior." Elias was confused. "Lead." "Yes," Zara replied, her voice softer now. "A warrior doesn't just follow orders. A warrior leads by example. A warrior shows others what it means to fight for something bigger than themselves. A warrior fights not just for their own survival, but for the survival of others." Elias thought about that. He had always thought that being a warrior meant being strong, being able to fight and win. But Zara was right. It was more than that. A true warrior wasn't just a killer. They were someone who fought for a cause, who inspired others to fight with them. Elias felt a weight settle on his shoulders. It was a lot to take in, but it also felt like something he could strive for, something that made sense. "What do I do?" he asked quietly. "You'll lead a group of the warriors in the next raid," Zara said, her voice steady. "You'll learn what it means to make decisions, to take responsibility for others. And you'll see that being a leader is far more difficult than just being a warrior." Elias swallowed hard. He had never been a leader. He had always been the follower, the one who stayed in the background. But now, for the first time, he understood what Zara meant. This was his chance to prove not just his strength, but his worth as someone who could lead others. He nodded, determination growing in his chest. "I'll do it." Zara's gaze softened just slightly. "I know you will." The next few days were a blur of preparation. Elias was given a small group of warriors to lead, all of them more experienced than he was. They looked at him with a mixture of skepticism and curiosity, and Elias could feel the weight of their expectations pressing down on him. They were looking to him for guidance, for leadership, and he wasn't sure he was ready for it. But he had to be. There was no turning back now. The raid was set to take place in a remote part of the alien territory where an enemy faction had been causing trouble. Zara trusted Elias enough to give him command, and that meant she believed he could handle it. Elias wasn't sure if he could, but he was going to try. For the first time, he wasn't just fighting for survival. He was fighting for something larger. He was fighting for the people around him, for his place in the world, and for the chance to prove that he belonged. As the day of the raid approached, Elias couldn't shake the feeling that everything had led up to this moment. This was the true test. It was one thing to fight to survive, but now he had to lead, and if he failed, the consequences would be far greater than anything he had faced before. But Elias wasn't afraid anymore. He wasn't just the boy who fought the Vorak. He was a warrior, and he was ready to lead. Elias stood at the front of the group, his heart racing as he looked at the warriors gathered around him. They were all taller, stronger, and more experienced than him, but today they were looking to him for guidance. The weight of the responsibility felt heavier than any armor he had worn before. His mind raced with doubt, but he pushed it aside. This was his moment to prove that he was ready. Zara had given him a small unit of 5 warriors, each one skilled in their own right. Zor, the warrior who had trained him the hardest, was among them, and his eyes were filled with an unreadable expression as he looked at Elias. The others, though silent, carried themselves with the confidence of seasoned fighters. They had followed many leaders before, but today they would follow Elias. He cleared his throat and stepped forward. "We've been given a task. There's an enemy faction causing trouble in the southern territories. Our mission is to neutralize them and return. No one dies unless absolutely necessary. We are here to end the threat, not to escalate it." He paused, waiting for any objections, but there were none. The warriors stood in line, silent but attentive. They had heard about the boy who had taken down the Vorak, the beast that had terrorized the land. They didn't fully understand how he had done it, but they respected him now more than they had before. His actions had spoken louder than any words could. "We move out in 15 minutes, Elias continued. "Make sure your gear is ready. We'll be quick, efficient, and precise." His words sounded more confident than he felt, but he didn't allow himself to second guess. The warriors moved to prepare, checking their weapons and adjusting their armor. Elias took a moment to gather his thoughts. The gravity of leading them still weighed on him, but he was determined to see it through. He wasn't going to let doubt control him anymore. He had to lead with the same resilience he had shown in the fight against the Vorak. Zor approached him as the group began to assemble. "You sure about this, human?" His voice was rough, like he was testing Ilias. Ilias turned to face him, his eyes meeting Zor's. "I'm sure," he said, his voice steady. "We'll get the job done." Zor nodded, though there was a hint of something in his eyes, respect maybe. Ilias couldn't quite read it, but he didn't need to. He just needed Zor's trust. The group set out, moving quickly and quietly through the dense forest that surrounded their camp. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth, and the trees loomed overhead, casting long shadows in the early morning light. Ilias led the way, his eyes scanning the surroundings for any signs of danger. His heart pounded in his chest, but his mind was clear. He had a mission to complete, and nothing was going to stop him. As they neared the enemy's stronghold, Ilias slowed the pace, signaling for the others to do the same. He crouched down, his body tense, and scanned the area. The stronghold was nestled in a valley, surrounded by thick trees and rock formations. It wasn't heavily guarded, but it was well hidden, a perfect place for the enemy to lay low and avoid detection. Ilias could hear the faint sounds of movement from within the stronghold. His instincts told him that this would be a quick and easy mission, but he couldn't ignore the nagging feeling in the pit of his stomach. Something didn't feel right. The enemy was smart, and they knew how to stay hidden. He wasn't going to underestimate them. He signaled for Zor and the others to flank the stronghold. They moved swiftly, spreading out in a loose formation, careful not to make any noise. Ilias stayed at the front, his mind sharp and focused as he navigated the terrain. His thoughts were clear now. He had to act quickly, decisively, and above all, he had to keep the warriors safe. They reached the edge of the stronghold without being detected. Ilias took a deep breath, his body poised for action. He looked at Zor, who gave him a small nod, acknowledging that it was time to move. Ilias raised his hand, signaling the attack. The warriors moved in unison, their steps light and fast. They reached the entrance, and Ilias quickly took cover behind a boulder, his heart racing. He peeked around the edge, watching as the warriors surrounded the enemy's position. The first wave of attacks came swift and silent, the warriors using their speed and agility to disable the enemy guards before they had a chance to react. Ilias could feel the tension in the air as the fight began. The warriors were efficient, their movements calculated and precise, but Ilias kept his focus. His job wasn't to fight. His job was to lead. He signaled to Zor, who moved forward, taking down 2 enemy soldiers with quick, lethal strikes. Ilias watched the battle unfold, his mind racing as he kept his team coordinated. Every decision mattered now. He couldn't afford to make a mistake. The enemy, though caught off guard, quickly regrouped. They fought back fiercely, their weapons flashing in the dim light. Ilias felt the weight of the situation settle over him. This wasn't just a test of strength. It was a test of his ability to lead. His heart pounded, but he didn't waver. He kept giving commands, making sure the warriors knew where to move, how to attack, and when to fall back. Minutes passed like hours. The sounds of battle filled the air, and Ilias' mind worked in overdrive as he directed his warriors, keeping them safe and ensuring they stayed on the offensive. He could see the enemy faltering. They weren't as organized, and Ilias' team was wearing them down. Finally, the battle came to a close. The last of the enemy soldiers fell, and the remaining ones surrendered, realizing they couldn't win. Ilias stood among his warriors, his body tense but his mind clear. The raid was over, and they had succeeded. He had led them to victory. Zor approached him once again, this time with something like a smile on his face. "Not bad for a human," he said, his tone grudgingly respectful. Ilias felt a rush of pride. He had done it. He had led them, and they had won. Zara appeared behind them, her expression unreadable as always, but there was a glint of something in her eyes. "You did well," she said simply. "You showed me that you can lead." Ilias nodded, but inside he felt a sense of fulfillment he hadn't expected. He wasn't just a warrior anymore. He wasn't just the boy who had fought a beast. He was something more. He was a leader. As the group began to make their way back to the camp, Ilias walked with his head held high. The warriors respected him now, not just because of his strength, but because he had earned their trust. He had proven himself. He had led them to victory. And for the first time in his life, Ilias felt like he truly belonged. He wasn't just surviving anymore, he was thriving. And this was only the beginning.